CAO, Pat? Can't hear Pat.
I'm coming on.
And Judy's online.
So maybe it's something under yours that says the host. Are you the host? Did you sign in yet? Maybe you have to sign in.
There you go. The Patty unmuted herself, so now we should be able to hear Patty, hey?
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, I just can't get one of these going. We'll just have to keep going here.
Okay, so it's okay to call this meeting to order at 7:02. Would someone from council be willing to read the acknowledgement, please?
I'm loud enough to pick me up.
I can do that.
Sure.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
So we acknowledge that we are on Treaty 6 territory, a traditional meeting grounds, gathering place, and traveling route to the Cree, Saulteaux, Blackfoot, Métis, Dene, and Nakota Sioux. We acknowledge all the many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit whose footsteps have marked these lands for centuries.
Thank you for that. So calling this meeting to order. Is there any additions, deletions, or changes to the agenda?
Nothing from administration. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, go ahead. Sorry, Patty.
Nothing from administration, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Anything from council?
Nothing.
I would like to add one item, please.
Nothing.
Okay. What number should we make that one? 8.4?
Sure, and we'll call it just a line of credit.
8.4 line of credit. Okay.
Mr.
Anything
Mayor,
else?
that's
Yep.
not a, unless it's a request for a decision, can we just move that to reports?
Okay, so 9.4 line of credit.
There might be a decision.
Oh,
A
So you might
request
be
for
bringing a
decision.
motion?
Yeah, not to, yeah, it's nothing major, just.
Okay.
I'd
So
like the
maybe-
8.4.
Okay, we'll leave it at 8.4 then. Anything else
Yeah.
from our council for changes, additions, or deletions possibly? If not, a call for a motion to adopt agenda as amended.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Councillor George.
I'll make a motion that we adopt the agenda as presented.
Thank you. Accept that motion. Any comments, questions, or concerns from council with that motion?
just bring me Len's
Okay.
iPad.
Haven't heard none, call for vote then. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And opposed? So the motion's carried. And this evening, we're very fortunate. We have some great people visiting us from Lamont County Regional Fire Chief and the District Fire Chief of Bruderheim, Shane Milliken and Leslie Clark. You have the floor.
Right, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you to the rest of council. It's a pleasure to be here to bring an update on regional fire service. They give you some insight as to what's been going on over the last little bit. So I have a small presentation. Shouldn't take more time than it needs to share what we have to.
Shane, is it okay if I say something before you get launched into your presentation?
Not sure.
I just wanted to say congratulations
certainly.
on your new role as District Regional Fire Chief of Lamont County.
Oh, thanks very much.
Yep, thank you. So
Um,
do you want questions at the end or during the?
Questions at the end would be great. It shouldn't take us too long to go
Okay.
through this. Just not sure if the screen share can be turned on for that presentation.
Yes, it can. You should be able to share your screen.
Okay. Oh, it says disabled.
The administrator may have to enable that.
I think I need one more pair of hands, Mr. Mayor. I'm sorry.
Sherry?
Oh, there's Dan.
Shane. Shane, it says that you should be able to. I don't know why.
Oh, okay.
Oh, we may have to continue. I think all of council has a package
Yeah.
or the information on
Sure.
their electronic
Yeah,
device.
I can read those highlights.
You want to try again, Shane?
Sure.
Shane, I have your presentation. I can do it offline.
There we go. Looks like it's
You got it?
working.
That just took a moment. Awesome.
Yeah, we don't have high-speed internet, so it takes a while.
Okay. Are you able to see that?
Well, we were.
Yep,
There we go.
there it is.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, perfect. Okay. We're in business now then. So I'm going to speak just on some regional initiatives, some regional numbers, and then I have District Chief Clark who's going to talk more specific to the district initiatives that are going on. Obviously understanding that COVID-19 has kind of put a hamper on some of the extra stuff that we typically do up to this point in the year. But so our purpose this evening, just to give you an update on current call volumes and call trends, both as a region, Lamont County as a whole, as well as districts specific to Bruderheim, particularly in-town calls and how that relates. Summarize some key response highlights and then to provide an update about district initiatives. So as of May 26th, so about a week old now, but we as a region, so Lamont County as a whole, have had 135 calls year to date. So these calls range from our highest number actually being fires this year, down to a single gas leak. As a side note, our dollar lost fire volume is up about 15% this year compared to last year. So there's certainly an increase in that for us anyway. As a fire district, Bruderheim has responded to 35 of those calls. And we also see a very large number, 18 of those calls have been fires as well. So grass fires, structure fires alike. So as you can kind of see for call volumes year over year, it's really tough to have a gauge. You'll remember that 2018, we had our large wildfire in North Lamont County, north of Bruderheim. So from January 1st to May 26th of that year, we had 165 calls just because that happened in May. But typically we're year over year, our call volume is kind of trending flat. It's not really changing too much total. There was actually a fairly significant drop in this particular reporting period in 2019. There's only 24 calls for Bruderheim last year to date. So 2019 total, we saw 302 calls compared to 366 the year before with the wildfire. So we're looking at a total town response of about an average of 35 to 37% of all the calls that Bruderheim responds to are actually in the town limits, out of the 68 to 91 over the last couple of years. So some of the highlights and where we kind of are really trying to focus our efforts when it comes to the statistical reporting is, number one, we look at the response time to structure fires. So in the town of Bruderheim, there has been consistently an under 10-minute response time for the past 4 years. There was one off-label response where we had a 14-minute response time, but that was due to a dispatch addressing error. So we actually went to the other side of town. But that's it. Everything else, one of your building codes actually requested a letter last year just to confirm that we can adhere to that 90% of the time, the 10-minute mark, and we're doing well above that. So that's really good. From a regional perspective, Bruderheim is considered a high-performing district when it comes to the statistics, so the shoot times, and we'll get into that on the next slide, but calls are generally well attended. We have really good response times all throughout the district, and we have really, really good attendance at the training and commitment to training. So it's really good to see that. And as I mentioned before, average in-town calls make up about 32% of our call volume. So response statistics, and so this is for everything within the Bruderheim Fire District, so not just in town. So the average shoot time, which for those of you that don't know, shoot time is measured from the time a unit is dispatched to the time that unit books en route or is responding to the call, is 7 minutes and 23 seconds. So that's pretty good. That's pretty exceptional actually for a rural fire service to have that. For some kind of benchmark, we typically look at about the 8-minute mark as a target. So it's a fairly consistent target across EMS and rural fire service to say that your shoot time should be 8 minutes or less, usually 80 to 90% of the time. So we're just working to really hone in on that and try to make that an achievable target for all of our districts. Average travel time for the district is around that 9-minute mark. Response time total average is 16 minutes. So that, again, that's all responses, including out of town responses. So obviously the longer it takes to travel, the higher the response time is, regardless of how good your shoot time is. And personnel responding to any given call is 5 members, which is 1 full truck, which is really good.
Lynn, are you?
So when you see the regional average, we're actually almost 2 full minutes under the regional average for Bruderheim for shoot time, and we're under about a minute or so, minute and a half for travel time. So that's, I mean, again, we take into account all the districts when we compute that average, so it's good to see. The only statistic that Bruderheim is above the regional averages is the total call time. And as I mentioned before, the fire volume this year has been tremendous compared to recent years. So we see Bruderheim taking a lot of that, a lot of those fire districts. So that's why. Now, when we look at the town side, so these are only responses within the town alone. The average response time to town events is 6 minutes, 38 seconds, travel time being 3 minutes, 16 seconds, with a total average response time of 9 minutes, 54 seconds. So on average, we will be at an incident in under, as I mentioned before. So I know it's important to highlight because we have seen, certain posts on social media, for example, it takes 20, 30 minutes for a fire department to get there, and that's not the case at all. And total call time in town is 2 hours, 23 minutes. So some bigger calls definitely this year so far. Staffing for Bruderheim. So our full organization is at 96 members across all districts, and Bruderheim has 21 of those members. So represents 22% of our regional workforce. So really, really healthy roster in Bruderheim here. So I'll just turn this over to District Chief Clark about some of the other district stuff.
Yes.
Welcome, Chief
Shane had
Clark.
mentioned COVID really put a dent in a lot of things that we do in the fire service and as a community organization. So we only have 29 staff hours for community events year to date. We did do the Stuff a Truck on March 14th. We actually have, I believe, 6 pallets of goods downstairs that we can't donate for our fundraiser right now because of COVID. So we just tidied that up. Yeah, we had a lot of stuff having to be canceled because of COVID. In 2019, we made it out to a lot of events in town and had a few of our own. These are that we enjoy doing, take pride in doing. So it's really disappointing to a lot of us that we can't do these events this year, and we're trying to figure out ways that we can get out in the community now more, especially with these different phases coming into effect. But it is difficult for us to keep our social distancing and safety and the public safety into account. So it's pretty difficult, but we are working on trying to figure out how we can get back into the community more with this going on. So we started tracking more and getting more involved in our physical fitness. So last year we had 405 hours, and this year we're only at 170, but we did have our gym area closed down for a bit and all of our PT classes canceled. So we did actually start our first one back up again. I think it was a week and a half ago. So what they did is went strictly outside on the front pad. Everybody had their own stations and stuff. So they were able to maintain social distancing and to keep their stuff separate from everybody else. So we are making arrangements to get back into that, and it's going well for us and others. In March and April, we couldn't meet for practices. Also, like, we had too many people. We were over the allowed limit of people to meet in person, and it was too dangerous. So we went over to virtual training. So we have different courses. We have an online learning website called Talent LMS that changed it up years ago. So there's different courses on there. And then we started doing a little bit of a mixed. So we had some our officers here doing demonstrations and training, different PowerPoints and stuff to everybody while we were at home. So we went on Teams. It's kind of what we're doing now, and it worked out really well and got to get us all talking and involved and kept us in contact while we weren't on calls. We have just started resuming in-person training. So our limit is 15 people maximum in the station at a time. So what we have done is split up into 2 specific crews. We kind of rotate people as needed, or if they're unavailable that night, we're able to move them. We actually do twice a week right now, every week up until the middle of July. And then we're taking our summer break still because we had a bit of a break. Now we're doing twice a week, so we don't get burned out. So we are going to take a little bit of a training break in the summer again, but that's going fantastic. Yeah, and then try to get out until we can't be outside anymore. We are doing really well with that. Like our training events, our participation is high. And like there, all of our newest recruits in our district have their full 1001 training or are working towards it. Our newest recruits, actually our 1001 class is on a bit of a hold right now because of COVID. The Alberta Fire Chiefs Association and where our Office of the Fire Commissioner is actually not marking exams right now. So we actually can't continue with the training the way that we want. So that's at a bit of a standstill for us right now. We also just posted for a new captain. So that's going well. And then looking also to work on succession plans again for our next round of officers to come up. So we encourage everybody, for no matter what position we post, if you're interested in being an officer or in growing with the fire service, that you submit an application, and then we will sit down and talk with everybody and find out what they need to do to achieve those goals later on when they are more ready. And that's something that they look forward to, and we do as well, because it's nice to see different firefighters step up and then say, hey, I actually like this. I know I'm not eligible to be a captain now, but they let us know that this is something that they're interested in, and then we'll get them on that path so that in a few years, maybe they will be our next captain that we promote or our next lieutenant. So we're excited for that. And like I said before, we are trying to be as active in the community as we can. We do get out, and then when we're out training, we were down in West Woodlands last week. So we try to talk to some of the people as we're doing events. Say, hey, we're just out training. Yes, you can stay and watch. Just keep your distance. And we put out our sign and try to stay involved that way. So difficult. That's it. That's all I have.
Thank you. That was a fantastic report. Very comprehensive. Really appreciate that. I have to give kudos to our fire department. Well-staffed, well-run, good organization. Thank you. Any questions from council for Fire Chief Shane or Fire Chief Leslie?
I have a question.
Go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
Mayor. So how many, you were talking about new recruits and new training. How many of you got training that are new, getting their 1001s?
All of them, I think, but one are enrolled. So we have 4 enrolled in their 1001 right now. And then one joined just after we had started the class. So he's just going through his new recruit stuff now in his mentorship, because he joined and then we had to cancel all our practices. So he's been keeping up with our online and stuff, and he's back in person training with us now, but he literally joined on the cusp of the COVID shutdown. So
Yeah, that's always a ripoff. Another question, knowing that we have lots of fires here in Bruderheim that are started by a younger generation, have you thought of doing anything online with education to geared toward kids for fire safety ideas? Like, and I see different things that different groups are doing, and like either it's a story or it's something along that line, but trying to focus on educating that younger generation how fires quickly can start and everything else. Because I'm up in Brookside, and well, you know what happened up here. So I'll just leave it to that, right?
So regionally, we actually are looking at enhancing fire prevention programming in general. I can't say that we specifically thought about that, but that's definitely a consideration that we can take forward. We are looking at better and more efficient ways across all of Lamont County to better do the fire prevention piece, which is key. And the Learn Not to Burn program, as it was once called, is kind of the go-to for fire prevention education in young people. And so we were actually looking just this last week at ways that we can implement that countywide, but I'm not 100% sure how that's going to work. And we'll likely be end up working with regional partners such as Strathcona County to enhance.
Yeah, and I see a lot of different groups like doing online stuff that is catching kids' attention, right? So
Yeah,
during these crazy times, if something like that could work for you. Because
Yeah,
yeah,
and
the other is a challenge.
If anything, COVID-19 has kind of brought out in us is the ability to move everything we can online. So that's definitely a consideration to make it more accessible.
Okay, good, thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions from council? I noticed during your presentation, you talked about the percentage that Bruderheim responds to Bruderheim calls versus Lamont County calls. So almost 2/3 of the calls for our Bruderheim Fire Department are in Lamont County. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes,
And
Mr.
so we don't really know for sure if it was broken down to maybe some was in the town of Lamont or Mundare or whatever.
Sorry, no, this report specifically focused on Bruderheim for that percentage.
Yep.
Yeah.
No, I was just curious how much of Bruderheim time is actually just in the county, or if it's broken up with other municipalities as well. But thank you for that presentation. Really well put together.
Mr. Mayor, I can certainly send that number too. That's a fairly easy statistic. I could send it to CAO Pat to forward on.
Okay, thank you.
Easy.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments, concerns from council? There's an opportunity to chat with our fire chiefs.
Other than just a huge thank you to you guys for going out there for us and protecting everybody out in Bruderheim. So I just want to thank you guys for doing that and making sure everybody's well trained and ready to go.
Yeah,
Thank
excellent.
you very much. Yeah.
For a rural fire department, response times and shoot times are awesome. Good job.
Yeah.
So if there's no other questions or comments or concerns from council, we need a motion to accept the presentation as information.
I move that town council accept the presentation from Shane Milligan, Regional Fire Chief, Lamont County, and Leslie Clark, District Fire Chief, Bruderheim, as presented.
Thank you very much. Any comments, questions, or concerns with that motion? Okay, haven't heard none. Call for a vote. Just say aye if you're in the affirmative. Aye.
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 And none opposed, and the motion's carried. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you
Thank
for your
you.
time.
Thank you,
Have a great
guys.
Thank you. Thank you.
Take care.
Night, thank
Have a
you.
good evening. Stay safe.
Yeah.
Have a virus-free evening. So moving on the agenda, number 6.1, we need to make a motion to adopt the minutes of May 20th regular meeting of council.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Councillor George.
I'll make a motion that we adopt the minutes of May 20th, 2020 regular meeting of council as presented.
Thank you, Councillor George. Any comments, questions, or concerns with the minutes? Everyone's had a chance to read them. Okay, we'll call for a vote then. All those in favor say aye.
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 And none opposed, and the motion's carried. Moving on to number 7, council priorities, information requests. With the gallery view makes it easy for me. I don't have to try to remember who's said what. And we'll start with Councillor Wayne.
I don't think I have anything at this time.
Okay, and Deputy Mayor Judy.
Whoops, I'm good, thanks.
Okay, Councillor Pat.
I was just wondering if administration got the letter of support out for the Canadian Rockies hemp development to our Minister of Agriculture, our Minister of Economic Development, as well as our MP and our MLA.
Mr. Mayor, through Councillor Lee, I reached out to Canadian Rockies and they asked us to hold off on that. They had a meeting this week and they would ask that after that meeting, they would be able to provide more specific information.
Okay, thank you. It was just as a follow-up to the motion that we had brought forward after we had.
Yeah, I contacted
yeah.
Aaron and he asked me to hold off on that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anything else, Councillor Pat?
That was it, thanks.
Okay, Councillor Len. Okay, Councillor Dan.
I guess just a follow-up from our last meeting about the questions that I put forward is how do we go about getting those answers generally? Just emails or?
So Mr. Mayor, through Councillor Scooswell, what questions were those? Sorry.
So the one was about signage for the campground. The other question was about a cost for one of those speed signs.
So I was, Mr. Mayor, through Councillor Scooswell, I was under the understanding that Dennis met with you about the campground sign. Was I wrong?
Yeah, no, I didn't meet with him.
Oh, okay. My apologies. I'll follow up with you.
Okay.
And a speedboard sign is about like the one that records speed. Is that we mean like the one that's electronic sign, solar speedboard sign is? Yeah, they're about $9,000.
That's it?
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.
And my apologies. We do have some new signage going up that we received this week that hopefully clarifies, as well as we made new registration envelopes at the campground that have clear directions for campers. And
Excellent.
we're updating our website as well and the information board that's out there. So hopefully we'll make it clear.
Cool. I will pass that info along. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for those questions, Councillor Dan. Was there any other questions from council before we move on to information requests? I just have one information request for CAO Pat. Has the crack sealing program for the year started off for the pavement?
Mr. Mayor, yes, it has.
Okay, that's great. That's what I was just curious about.
In between raindrops, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, it might be like last year. So moving on to 7.2 program requests. Councillor Dan, did you have any program requests?
Not today, thank you.
Okay. Councillor Pat?
Nothing today, thanks.
Councillor Len?
Nothing at this time.
Deputy Mayor Judy?
Nothing at this time.
Councillor George?
Nothing at this time.
Councillor Wayne?
Nothing at this time.
Okay. So moving on with the agenda, we're at 8.1 bylaw 10-2020 property tax sale bylaw.
Mr. Mayor, sorry, apologize. The purpose of this report is to provide council with information to establish the terms and conditions governing property sales by public auction held by the town of Bruderheim to dispose of property for tax arrears. The town council give first reading to bylaw 10-2020, the property tax sale bylaw. The Municipal Government Act requires that the town of Bruderheim offer for sale by public auction any property shown on its tax arrears list if the tax arrears are not paid. This bylaw will provide clarity on public auction terms and conditions, strategic plan, a community that is educated on responsibilities and limitations of council and administration, other impacts, Municipal Government Act, RSA 2000 M26, sections 419, 436.1, 418, and 436.9. This bylaw will provide clarity on the terms and conditions for those purchasing property that goes to public auction due to tax arrears. There are statements in the bylaw that ensure that those purchasing public at public auctions are fully aware that there's no warranty on the property purchase. This bylaw will be placed on the Town of Bruderheim website when council gives third and final reading of bylaw 10-2020, the property tax sale bylaw.
Thank you. So we'll be looking for a motion for the first reading of bylaw 10-2020.
I'll bring that forward.
Thank you,
That town
Councillor Pat.
council give first reading to bylaw 10-2020, the property tax sale bylaw.
Thank you for that. Any comments, questions, or concerns from council with that motion?
I have one question.
Go ahead, Councillor Len. I can barely hear you.
How many properties do we have?
I think he's muted right now.
Doesn't want to work. That's okay. I'm just asking how many properties are available.
Mr. Mayor, Councillor Falardo is asking how many properties are available for auction?
Okay,
I don't have that number with me, Mr. Mayor, but in 2020, there'll be no properties going to auction because of COVID.
okay. So the number is 0 for this year then. Thank you. Any other questions or comments or concerns from council? Okay, haven't heard none. We'll call for a vote then. All those in favor say aye.
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 And opposed, and the motion's carried. Thank you. And moving on, we're on to bylaw 11-2020, bylaw enforcement officer bylaw.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This report purpose is to specify the powers and duties of bylaw enforcement officer and establish disciplinary procedures for the misuse of power, including penalties and an appeal process applicable to misuse of power by a bylaw enforcement officer. During the Municipal Accountability Program review of October 17, 2018, it was noticed that the MGA section 555, 555, 556 requires that the town must pass a bylaw that addresses the powers and duties for bylaw enforcement officers, disciplinary procedures, penalties, and an appeal process. Administration researched bylaws from other communities and sought assistance from municipal affairs to find a bylaw that was more applicable to our community. Strategic plan areas, a community that is educated on responsibilities and limitation of council and administration. Other impacts, Municipal Government Act, RSA 2000, Chapter M26, Section 555, 556. A copy of this bylaw will be forwarded to Municipal Affairs when Council passes a resolution approving the third and final reading of bylaw 11-2020, a bylaw enforcement officer bylaw. The Town Council give first reading of bylaw 11-2020, the bylaw enforcement officer bylaw. Bylaws approved by council through resolution are placed on the Town of Bruderheim website and communicated through the newsletter.
Thank you very much. So we're looking for a motion for bylaw 11-2020.
I'll bring forward that motion.
Thank you for that, Councillor Pat.
I move that town council give first reading to bylaw 11-2020, the bylaw enforcement officer bylaw.
Thank you so much. Any comments, questions, or concerns with that motion?
I have one question.
Go ahead, Councillor George.
Who's going to enforce this bylaw?
Mr. Mayor, that would be the role of the Chief Administrative Officer notifying our contracted services supervisor, which would be Strathcona County.
And this would be action through complaint from citizen or visible or?
Mr. Mayor, through Councillor Campbell, this could be initiation by resident. This could be initiated by council, by staff. As you know, it's a contracted service, no other than our engineering service, our assessment services, accounting services. We just have to have a method to make sure that any complaints are addressed with.
And this bylaw covers our Strathcona contracted bylaw officers, right?
Mr. Mayor, if you look, we also have in the bylaw, if we were to have internal bylaw officers. So it's ones that are employed by the town of Bruderheim and ones that are contracted. So for instance, Sherry Cote, our Director of Planning and Legislative Services, is also a bylaw officer. So we would have different ways to discipline than we would with the contracted services as indicated in the bylaw.
Thank you for the clarification.
So with this contract, Patty, we'll have in both scenarios as an employee of the town of Bruderheim and as contracted service. We have covering both of them, right?
So Mr. Mayor, through Councillor Lee, yes, through this bylaw, we would talk about, you see there's a definition if it was a contracted service or an employee of the town.
Okay, and I see with the contracted service, there's no time frame as opposed to a town employee?
Mr. Mayor, through Councillor Lee, that's correct. So as a town, we would discipline according to our discipline policy for a town of Bruderheim residents. Whereas if it's a contracted service, it's up to that contracted service to follow their company's discipline process, right?
Okay, I was just curious. I was just wondering, well, I guess
The
that'll be
difference,
when we have our
yeah.
contract, the difference in timeframes, right?
Yeah, so
Could it go on for months or days or whatever? Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that. Any other comments, questions, or concerns from council? Pat, I do have a couple of things that I wanted to bring about. I think it would be beneficial for our council to be able to see what the what would be the proper wording, say the contracted companies procedures or their handbook on their employees. I think that would be helpful for our council. And then on 11B, it mentions the appeal process shall be implemented in accordance with the Town of Bruderheim Employee Handbook. Would our council be able to get a copy of that just so that we know what it says?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I've provided that before in the past, but we can definitely send it again.
Okay. And
And
do you think,
Mr. Mayor, I don't believe that we're entitled to the employee handbook of a contracted service, but I will check.
thank you. I appreciate that. Any other comments, questions, or concerns from our council? Okay, go ahead, Councillor George.
If it's an employee of our town, will this employee be removed from service until such time as this issue is resolved?
Mr. Mayor, through Councillor Campbell, we have a process in the employee handbook, and perhaps if you review that, that will make better sense. So there's no like you're suspended immediately. It depends,
No.
right? Depends on what it could be, that he looked funny at a resident and they took offense to it, or it could be that he beat him up, right? So you could be talking about civil suit. You could be talking about a letter on the file. Don't do that again, right? So for me to say exactly what would happen, it would be dependent on the situation was outlined in the employee handbook.
Thank you for the clarification.
Yeah, so once we get the copy of that handbook for council to peruse, that would be a good one. Thank you. Any other comments, questions, or concerns from our council with this motion? Okay, I haven't heard none. We'll call for a vote then. All those in favor say aye.
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 And opposed? And the motion's carried. Thank you for that. So moving on, we're on to 8.3 property tax penalty waiver policy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Purpose of this report is to adopt a policy that provides structure and guidance to council when responding to requests for a waiver of property tax penalties pursuant to the authority granted in the Municipal Government Act. Recommendation is that town council approve the property tax penalty waiver policy FIN 100. Previously, the town of Bruderheim did not have a guiding policy for council reference when deliberating on resident requests for a waiver of property tax penalties. This policy will provide guidance for council for future requests that arise. Strategic plan areas, the community is educated in responsibilities, limitation of council and administration, other impacts, legal, Municipal Government Act, RSA 2000, Chapter M26, Section 344 to 46. When residents contact administration and request an opportunity to meet with council to request a waiver of property tax penalties, administration will share this policy with the requester. This policy would provide clarity for council and the town property owners. Communication plan. The property tax waiver policy FIN 100 will be shared with the town of Bruderheim staff and placed on the town of Bruderheim website for easy reference by the citizens of Bruderheim.
Thank you for that. So looking for a motion for this property tax
Sure.
penalty waiver. Thank you, Councillor Wayne.
The town council approved the property tax penalty waiver policy FIN-100.
Okay, thank you for that motion. Any comments, questions, or concerns with this motion from council? I do have one thought, Pat, and I just wanted to make sure that it was clear. So I think the bylaw is pretty well written. I just want to understand. So when a property owner in town wants to apply for the program to get on to make regular tax payments, or what's that called again? You have an acronym for that.
Mr. Mayor, that's called the TIP program.
Yeah,
Tax
so
installment program.
great. So when a person applies for that, they're not applicable under this tax penalty relief bylaw then, right?
So, Mr. Mayor, just to clarify, this is for penalties.
Yep, okay,
This isn't for taxes. So we're not, wouldn't be for somebody to ask to have their taxes waived. This would be somebody paid late for reasons beyond their control. And
Yep.
they often come to council. And so we're just trying to put some, if you don't, like council generally before, we just brought it to council and we gave the history and the resident would express their concern and their situation. And this would just put a little bit around, or any of these reasons, the reason that you're applying, and give a little clarity to some of the things that council may consider, not necessarily say yes to.
yep, absolutely. I just wanted to make sure that it was clear in everyone's mind that that one is totally separate from this. That's thanks for that clarification. Any other comments, questions, or concerns from council with this motion?
I just have one. So I'm looking at this and I'm just wondering if there's any way of them clarifying what they really should be bringing us so that we understand, not just, oh, well, you know, I left a check in the thing, like how much it's going to, like, I'm wondering if there's a way of putting it in there. So we need all the information, I guess, before we
Mayor.
make the decision.
Mr. Mayor, through Deputy Mayor Schuler, that's a great question. If you look at the top of the policy, Sherry and myself, the Director of Planning and Legislative Services, and myself have started administrative procedures. And so through that, if you look at the top, it says cross-reference. Those don't
Okay.
come to council because they're administrative procedures, and that will have a form, exactly what you're saying. And they
Okay.
will fill it all out. And also you'll have a council request form attached to that. So those administrative procedures will prepare council with the information they need to make good decisions.
Great. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you for that. Any other comments, questions, or concerns?
There's no loopholes in this bylaw, is there?
So Mr. Mayor, through Councillor Campbell, it's a policy, not a bylaw. And as in a loophole, I'm not sure what you're asking.
Well, what I'm looking at is gray areas, you know. We pretty much have a policy that's black and white. And you either pay your taxes on time or you don't pay them on time. It's nothing, there's no real reasons.
Councillor George, I think if you draw your attention to 4.2, what you're talking about is if the person made an error or if there's some compassionate grounds or other matters, and then council would have to deliberate upon them, just like we've done in the past, right?
That's correct, Mr. Mayor. So for instance, if somebody had a sudden death in the family and was grieving, council could consider that that was a reason that they paid their taxes late. There's other reasons, out of the country, COVID, stuck in another country, can't get back. I mean, it's up to council to make those decisions. It's just sort of giving some guiding principles. It's not black and white. It's still council makes the final decision. We just put a little framework around, these are some reasons that we will take it to council. Right.
Right. Is that clear, Councillor George?
Yes.
Also, Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to clarify that it also says the taxes or penalties are only for the current tax year. So if somebody came back and said, we want to waive the penalties from 2017, which we've had before, clearly we have a policy now that says we won't consider penalties that aren't on the current tax year.
Right. Thank you for that. Any other comments, questions, or concerns from council?
And Mr. Mayor, I just want to make council comfortable that 4.4 says that policy does not preclude council from exercising its broad discretion to grant property tax penalty waivers pursuant to the MGA. So you still always have that 4.4 to go back on.
Right. Thank you. Hearing no more questions, comments, or concerns, call for a vote then. All those in favor say aye.
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 And none opposed, and the motion's carried. Moving on to 8.4. That's right. We have addition line of credit.
Thank you. I've had a lot of time since I've been off work to think about things. So I just been thinking about this, and I'd like to bring back the line of credit for discussion on one point. As it was stated last meeting, like not against the line of credit, just my thoughts are to use it as was stated for the pandemic relief, pandemic support, I guess, for the town. After that, I would like to see it canceled. Reason being is anything that is put on the line of credit is not accounted for in budgetary, like on our budget. So it would be another payment that we have not taken into account and that we have to find the funds for. So I guess I don't want the town to worry about how to pay for something later on when it's not in the budget already. So I just want to know that, I guess, once this pandemic's done, that this line of credit will be canceled. So I guess I'd like to put a motion forward that we continue. Sorry,
Mr. Mayor, could I interrupt with Councillor Lecco?
Yep.
Sorry, I just wanted to give some information. First of all, we can't cancel it. Mr. Mayor and myself already signed it. So what will happen is every year with ATB, we have to sign, if you remember, we have a debt limit we use for payroll. That's an automatic thing with ATB. So every year the line of credit will be added. So council has the option then to say to administration, we would like to discontinue that, but we've already signed the contract for the line of credit.
Okay.
So I believe it comes up, I will check, Councillor Lecco, but I believe it comes up before the end of the year. But I will double check on that.
Okay, I'm not opposed to it for this purpose. I just don't want to see us to go into debt for something and realize that how are we going to pay for it now? Or like we've got other means, I believe. So I just wanted to, I guess, bring that forward. So,
Mr. Mayor, if I could suggest something else to maybe make council feel a little more comfortable, is we develop a policy about using the line of credit, that we need a council motion to go into the line of credit. Administration just can't go into the line of credit without, except for the COVID, of course, and I would still come to council before I would use that. So far, it's looking pretty good on the tax side. But my intention was always to come to council in the July 8th meeting and saying, whether we're short, whether we're not, I'm going to do a financial update. And if I needed to use a line of credit, I would definitely be looking for a motion from council to use it. But if council is more comfortable, we could come up with a policy that states how we use the line of credit, if that would help, Councillor Lecco.
I have no worries about how it's like how can I put it? How you or I guess you would use it. I just don't want council to have to decide on putting it on a line of credit, then figure out how they're going to pay for it later on, right? Like that's I guess that's what's in my head is if we don't have the funds, we don't buy it, right?
And
so I guess this whole line of credit would be specific to this pandemic and pandemic only, right?
And I have a question, if I may, Mr. Mayor.
Mhm.
So
Just
being
hold on 1 sec, Deputy Mayor. I just wanted to get clear of Councillor Wayne's. We're not making a motion at this time, right?
No, I guess if it could have been discussion, but I didn't realize that there was the stuff behind it. So
yeah, it's legal contract. And also
okay.
I would say that, are we sure when the pandemic, like, are we going to be going back into it next winter? I would just raise that to council to consider. I'm not sure that we're not, according to some people, I'm not going to see another wave where we might see residents not being able to pay their bills. I would just caution council that it is a nice little buffer. Right now, we have in the past gone into overdraft at the end of the year in June when we are like 2-3 weeks out of collecting taxes. And that's that overdraft we already have. And then of course we don't budget to be in a deficit. We would never do that. So you wouldn't budget to use the line of credit. That's not good financing. And I don't even think we're allowed, right? So let me just put some thoughts to it and see if I can find something that will help council feel more comfortable with it in the next year until we hopefully get through the pandemic.
Mr. Mayor, I think administration is very clear on this. Council will have the decision of any time spending. So I don't think it's really an issue at all, but it'll have to be presented to council if tractor breaks down. it's presented to council. In any other spending, it's always presented to council. So I don't think it's ever going to be an issue because it has to come before us, before money's spent.
Thank you, Councillor Lynn. Actually, Deputy Mayor has the floor now.
Yeah, and kind of adding to that, just, you know, being in business and stuff, sometimes these line of credits are cheaper than, you know, how we borrowed money for that, for the paving that we did in West Woodlands, right? Where we can't pay it off, that long-term debenture, and we're paying that. Sometimes you can buy things, if we need a new truck, and put it on that and pay it off within a few months, knowing that it's in the budget, but you're using that with a lower interest to pay it off quicker. I'm not saying that's what you might do, but it's one of those options that's out there that if the interest is lower and you've got the extra money at the end of the year to pay it off, why not? Why pay somebody else interest? So having Patty put together a policy so, you know, that she does come to council for certain things, blah, 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 it's fine. I believe that. But sometimes those, like the interest rate that she got us is phenomenal, and something that you really want to have if you're doing business, you know, for something unforeseen, or even if it's a budgeted thing, maybe that's the best way to go because the interest is the best, right? So just my thoughts.
I was thinking that the, having that in place already, it's not like a time we have to scramble. We've already got it in place, and if something was to happen, and things do happen, and then we're hunting down what we can, whereas this way we have something in place, it makes it a lot easier when trouble strikes.
Yeah, I just don't want to be caught, you know, with access to more funds where we have reserves and whatnot that we could use if we're replenishing anyway, right? We can use that and replenish it later. So that was just my reason, I guess, behind it is I don't want to be caught with it. That's all.
Mr. Mayor,
Go ahead, Councillor George.
my statement would be, I'd feel more comfortable if we had a policy in place, something that in writing, and as to how we use this line of credit, what stipulations are for using it, and going forward from then, I think everybody would be comfortable with it. And it covers the CAO and the administration plus the council. That way there, we will have a procedure and a policy.
Thank you, Councillor George. Councillor Dan?
The way I see it is we got it for a reason. Everybody that's involved with this is responsible in the sense that we're not going to be going around just throwing pizza parties on this line of credit. The reason it's there is for ease of access. If we start putting all these restrictions and such onto it, now all of a sudden it loses its fundamental value in that what's the point of having it if we have to now jump through all these hoops just to use it? I would love to see what Patty comes up with, because we have to have that fine balance that is still useful. And I understand people's concern, but again, there's 7 councillors, there's all of administration, and they're all accountable for this money. They're not going to be irresponsible with it. It's not going to happen. Yeah, I'd love to see where this goes, what's presented in the future to alleviate these concerns, I suppose.
Thank you, Councillor Dan. Any other thoughts on this issue? I just wanted to give a couple thoughts of my own on it. I agree that for emergency purposes, a tool like this is useful. For major purchases like paving projects, is nowhere near enough money to do that with. Paving projects like West Woodlands was over $1 million. I believe this was for $350,000. And I understand that there's a place, especially in business, for a line of credit. A little different in municipalities when you're planning budgets for the year and you got to stick to them. Hadn't heard that before about having to go into overdraft at the end of the fiscal year. That's interesting. I'd like to know more information about that. And seeing a policy, yeah, I would love to see a policy in regards to that and see what Patty would be able to produce. So thank you. Any other thoughts on it before we move on?
Mr. Mayor, could I just get a motion for administration to look into some sort of policy for the administration of the line of credit?
Okay. Councillor Wayne, would you be?
So, yeah, make a motion to ask council or ask administration to come up with a policy in place for the town line of credit.
Thank you. Is that sufficient motion for administration guidance?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Any other comments, questions, or concerns with the motion? Okay, call for a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And the motion's carried. Thank you for that. So moving on to 9.1, council committee reports. Looking for a motion to have council receive the council committee reports.
I'll make that motion. I'll make a motion that the council accept the council committee reports as presented.
Thank you. Any comments, questions, or concerns with that motion? Haven't heard none. Call for a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And opposed, and the motion's carried. 9.2, we're looking for a motion for the mayor report.
I'll for the motion that we accept the mayor's report,
Thank you.
committee report, and thank him for my BSc.
Yeah, thanks for
Okay.
that. I just wanted to add before we vote on it, there was a couple of items that came up before, after I had written a report, because we had wanted to report early. The school council meeting was this past Monday evening, attended for Councillor Lee. It was interesting to hear and got an opportunity to hear some thoughts from different folks and where they're at the school. Great group of volunteers. And for Water Commission, there's a meeting tomorrow evening at Chipman for the Water Commission. It's just a couple of folks and the engineer to prepare for the Friday meeting, which is a meeting with the Northeast Water Commission and our commission, just a couple of folks from both sides and the engineers to talk about some issues. And that's what I just had to add to the report verbally. If there's no questions or concerns, I'll call for a vote on the mayor's report. All in favor, say aye.
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 And opposed, and the motion's carried. Looking for a motion to receive the CAO report.
I'll make that motion.
Councillor George.
I make a motion that we receive the CAO report as presented.
Thank you. Any comments, questions, or concerns with that motion from council? While folks are thinking, I did have one item I wanted to inquire about. CAO Pat, you had some mention about the Canada Day event in there, and I noticed today that Fort Saskatchewan announced that they're partnering with a number of other municipalities and they're going to have a virtual Canada Day event. And I was just wondering how things are looking for Canada Day for Bruderheim.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Sherry and I unfortunately don't have anything in writing yet, but we'll be sharing with council shortly.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments, questions, or concerns with the motion from council?
I have a few questions.
Go ahead, Councillor George.
It's to do with our water, waste, and storm systems. We're having the divers come in August. Could we be privileged to report on their findings when they come in to clean that the water reservoir, as to what the conditions of the reservoir is and what they're finding?
I would imagine that our CAO is going to share a high-level report for council. Is that correct, CAO Pat?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, through Councillor Campbell, absolutely will share information.
And with the problem with our evap ponds rising, we could be in a time where we may have to early release. Have we been tracking rainfall and input flows into that system? Daily rainfall, and because it has quite a detrimental effect on that area as to the levels. And if we have to discharge early, we may have to have some very good data to say why we're discharging.
Mr. Mayor, through Councillor Campbell, I can't answer the question. I will get back to council if we're recording the daily rainfall, but Dennis, the Director of Public Works, actually stopped in today to talk to me about his concerns, and we are probably looking at an early release. So I trust that he's tracking and in touch with Alberta Environment to make sure that we have all the things in place. It's not a desirable place to be in when you do an early release. So I'm sure that he's doing what he needs to do to make sure we can do that.
And another thing there, the sanitary wipes, it seems to be blocking off the diverter gate, right?
That's correct, Mr. Mayor.
And how often is that system checked?
Mr. Mayor, I'll have to get back to you.
Before it's plugged? Is there could be maybe a screen put in there or some way of trapping that before it gets into the diverter gates? Or is there that system in place?
Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry, I don't know.
It's something we have to check on. You know, this is causing us problems. We have to correct it.
Mr. Mayor, there's one way to correct it. Get people to stop flushing the wipes.
You can throw a rock, but you can't teach it.
The Brookside pumping station is a spot that's catching a lot of that before it gets into the lagoons, right?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, we actually hydrovac'd all that out. And these sunny wipes are the ones that got through before it completely shut off. So.
Thank you. Any other questions or concerns from council?
Has there been any back flooding due to this cause or damages to anything, or have we caught it before it has caused any problems upstream?
Mr. Mayor, through Council Campbell, do you mean to residential houses or?
Yes.
No, Mr. Mayor, there's been no backups in any houses that I know of. I'll double check.
Thank you.
Okay, that's it. Councillor George?
Yes, that's it.
Okay, Councillor
Thanks for the
Dan, I
report.
believe you got your hand up.
Yep. I was just curious if you've heard any feedback from the opening of the skate park. I've noticed plenty of kids congregating and having fun over there and doing their things. Just hoping to hear some positive feedback about that.
Mr. Mayor, through Council Scoosball, we actually had a couple complaints on, was it Saturday? Just looking at my director of planning. I think it was Saturday that the numbers were over. But I think generally when we have our staff checking the site 2 to 3 times a day, it appears that there's an adult with a lot of the youth that are monitoring that. I don't know if you noticed, but we just advertised for playground ambassadors. So we're hoping we've got a couple of applications that we can do some education on the strength and the importance of following Alberta health regulations and flattening the curve. So we're doing our very best to make sure that everybody's safe there. More of a concern, of course, is the playgrounds when you have shared touch points.
Yeah. So were the concerns that were brought forward, was it too many people there? Is that what the concern was?
Mr. Mayor, through Councillor Scooswell, yes, that's exactly what it was. So there can be up to 50 people in the park, but on the play structure, they have to keep 2 meters apart, right?
Okay.
There can be 50 people in the park area, but they all have to be 2 meters apart.
Gotcha. Something I did see, just some pictures and stuff in and amongst parks. People were doing, or I don't know if it is maybe municipalities or whatnot, but they're doing just like chalk outlines, like bubbles on the grass. Is that possibly an option that we could think of, look at? Something that wouldn't be too costly or harmful?
Mr. Mayor, through Councillor Scooswell, yeah, we had seen a couple of those things on social media, and I was hoping our playground ambassadors could help us with some of that, just to kind of like, and they also have done the, like a rubber tire or something like that, a blow up item to show the kids, like just make it fun, put them inside a rubber inner tube and say that's actually 2 meters, right? So they actually get a visual of how far you have to be from your friend. And I imagine most kids can't visualize that, right? So I would think that we're doing pretty good. I'm sure you've seen in the news that there's been lots of concerns in the cities, and They are taking action by doing rotating closures. But I think in our community overall, I've seen a lot of compliance. I'm very happy with it so far.
Excellent.
Thank you for that. Any other comments, questions, or concerns?
I
Councillor George?
I should have maybe brought it up with information. I've had a couple of people ask me about the compost. A lot of people would use that compost if they had availability to load it. Maybe this is something that we could look at and have it on as an appointment only means of helping people out.
How would that look like to you, Councillor George?
Like, okay, if you wanted a half-ton load of compost, you would phone the office and you'd make an appointment, and that was convenient for our public works, and then you'd come and get your product and leave. You may have to pay for the loading of it, but it's some way of getting rid of our compost and also helping out the community.
Mr. Mayor, through Council Campbell, do you mean using our loader or skid steer to load them?
It would have to be done by public works people loading the vehicle. Nobody else can use the equipment.
Mr. Mayor, we wouldn't be allowed to load personal vehicles. That would be against our insurance policy. Unfortunately, it could help shovel.
And Mr. Mayor, I'll speak deadly against that. I don't want that stinking near my property. It stinks viciously, and nobody really wants it near their house, believe me.
Councillor George, was there anything else?
No, but the smell gets bad in some places too.
Thank you, Councillor George. Any other questions from council? Just wanted to inquire, the playgrounds for the town, we're opening them June 5th. Is that correct?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, that was to match the original date provided by Elk Island Public Schools.
Okay. And the school playground is not open yet either, so that one will be June
It
5th
is.
then too.
It's open now, Carl. The sign is posted.
Yeah,
There's a
but
sign posted. Kids are
when I
playing
was
there.
when I was at the meeting on Monday, the principal was saying it wasn't actually open. So maybe we got some different thoughts there, but I just wanted to inquire about the town one. So that's June 5th. Thank you. If there's no other questions for CAO, Pat, call for a vote then on her report. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And opposed? None. Then the motion's carried. Thank you. Correspondence. I only have one item to bring up for correspondence. It came in the mail to the town via percolator today. It was a package from Enhance Energy, who built the Alberta Carbon Trunk Line. Is the largest carbon trunk line in the world. It moves carbon from northern Alberta to southern Alberta or central Alberta, and it's in operation now, and every councillor, mayor, and the town got a certificate, and your name is associated with a certain tonnage of material that they've moved already. So that company should be given some kudos for making the air we breathe in our area cleaner by helping remove carbon from the footprint of the area. And it's just a responsible thing for industry to do. So kudos to Enhance Energy for not only giving us a nice certificate, but for doing that work. And it's taken a long time to come to fruition. When Premier Ed Stelmach was premier is when this program first got initially off the ground. So I just wanted to bring that forward. And so if you want to get your certificate from the town office, Pat or Sherry has them. And the one for the town is going to be put on display, I think. Is that right, CAO Pat?
That's right, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. And that's it for correspondence. Closed session, we don't have one this evening, right?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, if I could just add one more thing under correspondence, my apologies. We just received notice from the federal government yesterday that we're eligible for 3 youth employment grants. So it was for 8 weeks for youth from 18 to 30. So we'll be advertising We already have one youth employed, so we'll be advertising for 2 more youth in this week.
Great. That's
Good.
good news. And that's for the whole summer?
8 weeks, Mr. Mayor.
Awesome.
That's fantastic.
Good.
Be a big help cutting the grass. If we don't have anything else, I'd be looking for Councillor Wayne's hand to shoot up there.
Make a motion to go home or to the couch, wherever's closer.
Back to the pajamas. Thank you very much, everybody. Thanks to administration. And once again, thanks for your patience doing this virtual. All those in favor of adjourning, say aye.
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 And opposed? None opposed, and we're adjourned. Thanks, Pat.